Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Metro Board activities of November the 18th, 2021. Before we begin, I'd like to ask our Chief Safety Officer, Teresa Impastato, to provide us with our safety contact.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next Thursday is Thanksgiving, a day in which we gather with gratitude. As we enjoy this holiday, here are 4 tips to keep you and your loved ones safe. Thanksgiving is the #1 day of the year for cooking fires. More than 4,000 fires occur on Thanksgiving Day. Avoid these risks by never leaving cooking unsupervised and ensuring you have proper equipment to extinguish a kitchen fire. Incidents of food poisoning also increase during the holidays, especially around Thanksgiving, as people are preparing and consuming more food than usual. Approximately 51 million turkeys are consumed on Thanksgiving. To protect your loved ones, always wash your hands after handling raw or undercooked poultry and use separate cutting boards for raw meats and produce to prevent cross-contamination. With Thanksgiving being one of the most travel-heavy times of the year, it's important to be prepared before hitting the road and to drive defensively, especially during bad weather. To protect your loved ones while traveling, buckle up every trip and avoid texting while driving. Lastly, many generations tend to gather to celebrate holidays, and the risk of COVID-19 and seasonal influenza are heightened during this time. The best way to minimize COVID-19 and influenza risk is to get vaccinated. If you are feeling ill or have symptoms, get tested for COVID-19. On behalf of Metro, I wish everyone in the region a safe, happy, and healthy Thanksgiving holiday. This concludes our safety contact.
Thank you, Ms. Impastato. Again, good morning and welcome to the November 18th Metro Board activities. I'm Lucinda Babers, Principal Director from DC and First Vice Chair. Unfortunately, Chair Smedberg cannot be with us today, so I will be serving as Chair for purposes of our meetings today. Alternate Director Kanik Aguirre will be serving as Chair Smedberg's alternate. Welcome, Kanik. I'd also like to note that Mr. Christopher Zappi has joined us today. He is the new Maryland alternate member for Maryland. He was sworn in by our board corporate secretary yesterday, so he can participate in this morning's ethics training, which is required of all principal and alternate members. We will be conducting his public swearing in at today's board meeting. We're beginning with the executive committee this morning. Since this is our first meeting, I'll ask the board corporate secretary to call the roll. Ms. Ellison?
Thank you. Alternate Director Aguirre?
Present.
Vice Chair Babers?
Present.
Vice Chair Slater?
Present.
Director Klein?
Present.
Director Letourneau?
Present.
Director Lowe?
Present.
Director Drummer?
Present.
Director Martin Proctor?
Present.
Alternate Director Zappi?
Present.
Alternate Director Helper? Alternate Director Alcorn?
Here.
Alternate Director Graham? I see him here. He may be having a tech issue. Okay, Madam Vice Chair, you have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. First, we'll take care of our administrative business. Approval of agenda. I trust that everyone has had the chance to review today's agenda. If there are no objections to the agenda, we'll consider it approved as presented. Any objections? No, the meeting agenda is approved. We have the minutes from our previous meeting before us for approval. If there are no objections to the minutes, we'll consider them approved as presented. Any objections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. We have 2 items on today's agenda. First, the board's annual ethics training session, and next, an update on the progress of recommendations made as part of the bus transformation project. The board's code of ethics requires that each member receive in-person ethics training annually, and today's session fulfills that requirement. It also gives board members the opportunity to ask any questions they may have of our General Counsel, Patty Lee, and the board's ethics officer, Phil Staub. I would like to reiterate that since these training sessions are required of all board members, we are joined by the board's alternate directors this morning. Next, staff will provide an update on the progress of the strategy recommendations outlined in the bus transformation project, including those recommendations identified as priorities by the board. I'll now turn the floor over to Ms. Lee and Mr. Staub to begin our training.
Good morning, Vice Chair Babers and board members. My name is Patricia Lee. I'm WMATA's General Counsel, and I am joined today with my colleague Phil Staub, who is the Board Ethics Officer. As Vice Chair Babers mentioned, the Board Code of Ethics requires annual training of all board members, including alternates. Sorry, Phil, could you? Requires training every year. I encourage, the other purpose of this training is also to encourage board members to regularly review the Code of Ethics. Our agenda today, we will go through some particular aspects of the Ethics Code, fiduciary duties, conflicts of interest, gifts, disclosures, and then at the end, Phil will take board members through some hypothetical fact scenarios where we'll apply the ethics code to a hypothetical set of facts. Okay, thank you very much, Phil. And please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. So to whom do the board members owe their fiduciary duties? So both under the compact and as codified in the board's adopted Code of Ethics, board members owe a fiduciary duty to both WMATA and to his or her appointing authority. And what are the fiduciary duties? So in the board's ethics code, there are 4 fiduciary duties: duty of loyalty, duty of confidentiality, duty of care, and duty to avoid conflicts of interest. And I'll touch on each of these briefly. So duty of loyalty, that means that board members should act in the best interest of WMATA and your jurisdiction in good faith and do so objectively and independently. Any board actions should not be taken in your own self-interest or the interest of another person, entity, or organization, but in the interest of WMATA. Duty of confidentiality. It's important to keep confidential all non-public information learned through your board service. Failure to, disclosure of confidential information to third parties, including potentially certain people in the jurisdiction or your appointing authority, could result in statutory violations such as violation of privacy laws or potentially the loss of the attorney-client privilege. Duty of care. Act with appropriate attention and be fully apprised of all reasonably available information. And this essentially means, obviously, do some homework, attend board meetings, read up on some of the board materials that staff provide in advance of making any board decisions so that you're able to make informed decisions. And duty to avoid conflicts of interest. Avoid any action that would diminish the public's confidence in the integrity of the board or WMATA. Examples of this, and we're going to go into a little bit more detail because this is one that usually raises the most questions. Do not use your board position to for favored treatment of any person or entity. Do not use your board position for personal gain. Do not solicit or accept gifts, monies, or any other thing of value in connection with your service as a board member. Okay, so what is a conflict of interest? A conflict of interest is when a board member's ability to perform their duties fairly and objectively would be compromised Conflicts of interest include but are not limited to when a board member has a substantial interest or duty in an interested party. And I just want to stop for a minute there. It's important to know that while the words in the ethics code and the definitions of conflict of interest and substantial interest or duty and interested party in the ethics code are important, it's really the spirit of the ethics code, you know what I mean, that is very important. So if in any situation you believe there may be a conflict, even the appearance of impropriety or conflicts, it's important to raise it to Phil or myself so we can help resolve that issue. And there are ways to resolve. So a conflict of interest does not necessarily mean that a board member may not participate in an action that involves that particular conflict. There are two ways of resolving conflicts of interest. One is recusal. There's no approval necessary. The board member would notify the chair that he or she wishes to recuse because of a particular conflict, and that board member would then not participate in that particular board action. The other way to resolve a conflict of interest is also by declaration. And here, the board member, if he or she believes they have a conflict of interest, would raise it with Phil, the board's ethics officer, determine whether or not, even with the conflict, the board member is able to participate objectively and fairly. And if the ethics officer agrees, then the board member and the ethics officer would make a proposal to the board, and the board would then have to vote publicly to approve the declaration and then permit the board member to participate in that particular action. Okay. Gifts. So as a general matter, the ethics code prohibits soliciting or accepting gifts from prohibited sources. Prohibited source is somebody who would give, an entity or person that would want to give a board member a gift because of the board member's position. So solely because you happen to be a board member, they want to give you a gift. And that's what a prohibited source is. There are some limited exceptions to accepting gifts, and gifts to household members will be imputed to the board member. So even in that situation, if it falls in a limited exception, and you do accept the gift after consulting with Phil or the board's ethics officer, you're still required to disclose receipt of that gift in your ethics file. Disclosures. Disclosures are very important. This is the main way that the board maintains transparency. Since we are a public agency, there are annual disclosures that board members fill out both on becoming board members and then annually thereafter. However, importantly, there is a continuing obligation to disclose. So in other words, if you disclose when you join the board in May, for example, but something changes in August, maybe you join a nonprofit or some other organization, you have an obligation to update your disclosure. And then also, as I mentioned previously, to the extent you receive a gift that falls into one of the gift exceptions, you should also fill out and submit a gift disclosure. Okay, so any questions just on a general highlight of the ethics code? All right, well then I will turn this over to my colleague Phil Stopp, who will take you through some scenarios. Phil?
Thank you, Patty, and thanks to the board members for attending this morning. So in this first scenario, there's a WMATA vendor that we're just going to call ABC. And as a result of being a vendor, ABC is an interested party. Now, your spouse works for a business that has done work with ABC. although is not currently doing any work with ABC. A matter comes before the board that involves the interests of ABC. And the question is, can you participate in that matter? The answer is yes, you can participate after the board approves a declaration in lieu of recusal. The reason for that is that, as I mentioned, ABC is an interested party, and your spouse's employer has done business with that interested party, now being affected by matters before the board. Your spouse's interests are imputed to you, as Patty said. So, although we can't be sure based on these facts presented here, whether this is a substantial duty or interest, it could create the appearance that your ability to participate fairly and objectively is compromised. And that is likely to be handled by, as I said, a declaration in order for you to participate. These situations are highly fact dependent. So for instance, if your spouse's employer was to start working for ABC again, let's just say not on a WMATA project, that would change the circumstances. You'd want to update your disclosure and have a discussion with me or Patty before deciding whether a declaration is still appropriate or you would instead recuse yourself from participating in matters affecting ABC. Any questions on the first scenario? Okay. Okay. Scenario 2. You are a board member in a company, in a organization called the Union of Concerned Engineers. It's a nonprofit. It advocates for infrastructure investment. Do you need to disclose that you are on UCE's board? The answer here is quite clearly yes. It's a fiduciary duty, and you're required to disclose your fiduciary duties. It actually would not matter whether UCE advocates for infrastructure investment, which might be related to Metro or not. You would still need to disclose. Again, to illustrate how fact dependent this is, let's say UCE provides a ridership analysis to Metro. Now, beyond just reporting, you would need to recuse yourself from matters involving that ridership analysis, just as you would for any other matter affecting UCE's interests. No questions, I'll move on to scenario 3. This time we're talking about your employer. And you work for a financial consulting business. A WMATA vendor approaches your employer to do work on non-metro matters. Can your employer accept that business? And yes, your employer can provide consulting services to the client on matters unrelated to WMATA. Now, here again, you would want to update your disclosure and have a discussion with Patty or me about how to handle matters that would come to the board involving this vendor that your employer is now providing services to. Let's just say, to change the facts again just a little bit, that you're more than just an employee to this company. You have an ownership interest or you serve on the board. Now you have a financial interest in this contract with the WMATA vendor, between your employer and the WMATA vendor. Now you have, again, an update to your disclosure and a discussion with Patty or me to discuss how to handle the ethics issues from that slightly different situation. If there's no questions on that, I'll go to our final scenario, which is always a crowd favorite, involving the APTA conference. So you're at the APTA conference, and there's a WMATA vendor hosting a hospitality suite. It's open to everybody at the conference to stop by. And the question is, can you attend? Can you visit the suite? And the answer is yes. We're just talking about you stopping by. That is fine by the ethics code. But again, we can change the facts just slightly here. You're offered something as you're bound to be at the hospitality suite, anything of value. That's something that you'll need to report as a gift. First, I guess I should say, you'd first have to make sure it meets an exception that allows you to even accept it. And once you do, report it as a gift. Or let's just say, rather than open to everybody, it's ticketed. It's an invite only. That's a very different situation, and that's something that you'd want to discuss with Patty or me to determine whether you can attend. Those are the scenarios we wanted to cover. Any questions on those or any other ethics questions?
Okay, well, thank you very much for your attention. And again, I encourage board members to review the ethics code from time to time, to seek advice from Phil and I as early and often as you would like or you believe. And please disclose, disclose, disclose. That's the best way that we can help you resolve any potential conflicts of interest. Okay, thank you again for your attention.
Thank you, Patty and Phil. And I'm not seeing any raised hands, so I don't believe we have any questions. So next we'll go to the bus transformation project update.
Good morning and thank you. My name is Tom Webster. I'm Metro's Executive Vice President for Strategy, Planning, and Program Management. We thank you for the opportunity this morning to provide an update on the progress and recommendations of the bus transformation project since the program was endorsed by the board back in January of 2020. So a few highlights up front. The jurisdictions and Metro have partnered to implement bus priority improvements that will improve the speed and reliability of buses. Virginia, the district, and Maryland are all implementing dedicated bus lanes and working with Metro to implement transit signal priority as well as queue jumps. And of course, back in September, Metro implemented more frequent all-day service on about 36 of the most used, most ridden Metrobus routes. And importantly, 3 bus priorities or board priorities for improving the Metrobus service guidelines, free transfers between bus and rail, and mobile payment have been implemented since then. Next slide, please, Rocco. So the regional bus transformation project began in 2018. And incorporated more than a year of public and stakeholder input to develop strategies and recommendations. And the goal of this is broadly to transform the region's bus system, both Metrobus and service provided by the jurisdictional operators, into a system that provides fast, frequent, reliable, and affordable service that feels unified and advances transit equity. So buses are, of course, a major part of the region's transportation network, and the pandemic and the region's recovery from it have confirmed that importance of bus service for our region and for our customers. Bus service in our region is provided by 9 operators, including Metrobus, and essentially the bus transformation project confirmed the opportunities to improve that service. Also, importantly, survey and other research have shown that bus riders in our region are often likely to not own a car, that they live in households that make less than $30,000 annually, that they're more likely to have limited English proficiency, and that over 80% are people of color. So our customers and potential customers in the region indicate clearly and consistently that their priorities are for more frequent, reliable, and faster bus service. And we hear this across all demographics, including low-income customers and respondents, across all areas of the region and all types of customers, whether they're frequent or infrequent customers. Riders and potential riders want more direct buses and longer hours of operation. Affordable fares are also one of the priorities for customers, but again, improved service is consistently a higher priority. Other customer priorities include, of course, safer buses and bus stops, better mobile applications for information and payment, and clearer and less confusing bus service and a less confusing regional bus network. So before the pandemic, bus speeds were declining significantly, resulting in longer travel times for customers because of traffic congestion, competition for curbside space from delivery trucks, taxis, services like Uber and Lyft, and then a general lack of enforcement of parking and traffic restrictions. So between about 2008 and 2018, average bus speeds dropped from about 11 miles per hour to 10 miles per hour. And this, of course, was the average. So while some buses were still moving at 20 or 25 miles an hour in some parts of the region, there are buses that are operating as slow as 3 to 5 miles an hour during peak periods. And these low bus speeds certainly inconvenience and delay our customers, and they also result in higher operating costs. The 9% decrease in bus speeds over that 10-year period resulted in an estimated increase of about $30 million to Metro's operating budget annually. And importantly, these issues are, of course, not things Metro can resolve alone because buses operate on the jurisdiction's roadways. So transforming bus service is fundamentally a partnership of the service providers, including Metrobus, and the jurisdictions who own, operate, and enforce roadways in the region. So the bus transformation project was led by a executive steering committee, a group of leaders from the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Over the project's roughly 18-month timeline, the steering committee and project team engaged with the public, customers, stakeholders, including the jurisdictions, the board, and our Metro leadership team, as well as service operators. And the team conducted numerous surveys, public meetings, focus groups, and pop-up meetings with the public and with customers. All of that input essentially formed the basis for the 4 strategies and 26 recommendations from the project. So in summary here, the 4 strategies of the bus transformation project focus on frequent and convenient bus service, bus priority on roadways, improved customer experience, and then improved coordination to ensure implementation of the strategy by Metrobus and all of the bus systems in the region. Now I'm going to turn it over to 2 of our team members, Allison Davis and Rocco Chowdhury, to provide progress updates on each of these recommendations.
Great, thanks, Tom. So in the following slides, Rock and I are going to go through each of the recommendations. On the left side, you're going to see exactly how it was listed in the bus transformation strategy, and then progress is shown on the right. Again, when the strategy and recommendations were endorsed in January 2020, a subset of recommendations were identified for early action, and those are shown in bold. So Rock and I are going to go through these for each one of the 26, but also provide a short update on progress on a few of the recommendations. So as Tom mentioned, the frequency and convenience of bus service is really what entices people to ride, and we hear that over and over again. And so the first strategy includes the recommendations of the building blocks of that service. So the first was defining standards for service type and quality, and setting targets so that customers can understand how well we're doing. Standardizing data so the quality of service can be measured across operators and across the region. Redesigning the bus network, collaboratively redesigning the bus network to build a better and more equitable network than we operated pre-COVID, and revisiting the very metro-specific service definitions and funding allocation to ensure that these building blocks of our service still work for the region, and then finally investigating opportunities for on-demand service. So of these 5, we've accomplished 1, the service guidelines, and are ready to launch the bus network redesign. So Rock, if you can go to the next slide. Just want to spend a couple of moments talking about the service guidelines and the network redesign. So service guidelines provide that baseline of bus planning and monitoring. They're the framework for how we and you make decisions, right, in times when funding is available, in times when really tough decisions will be necessary. And what they do is really set up an apples to apples comparison for similar service. So that way we're comparing framework routes to framework routes. We're not taking peak period commuter service and expecting it to operate as well or as framework routes. So that 4 different types of classification, and then those density tiers to recognize the differences in density and land use across the region, sets that framework for then how the targets and guidelines are set up. So I want to actually also point out that the guidelines incorporated a lot of feedback and constructive contributions from the jurisdictions and local bus providers. And now with these and the associated annual line performance report, staff, board members, the public better able to evaluate equity, quality of service across the service that we provide. And it also brings us in line with our peers, both every local bus provider in the region, as well as peers in the industry who have more recently adopted guidelines. So next slide. Redesigning the Metro bus network, and I know there's been a lot of discussion about that. So that's recommendations actually C and D. We're going to incorporate the revisiting the service definitions and subsidy allocation as part of this. So can help us meet multiple goals, and once the project starts, we will be engaging with you and all the rest of the stakeholders and the public about that. But ultimately, it's to provide the fast, frequent, reliable service that customers want. And so, while we're making important investments now, right, the work around the frequent service network that we implemented in September, the transfer fare transfer policies, neither of these efforts nor the annual budget process that we do every year really enable us to easily simplify and remove overlapping service, consolidate bus stops comprehensively, clarify where bus priority BRT should go, bring service to new places where we should go but don't today, or really help us simplify the network and route naming, so that people who want to ride bus can actually understand how it works and know what to do. So, like our peers, we've tried to do this as part of the annual budget process. And I think no one would dispute that we haven't been as successful as we would like. So this is really why transit properties across the country do network redesigns, able to comprehensively look at the entire network and the entire amount of service that's provided, and just do a much more comprehensive, goal-focused redesign. So ours is ready to launch. We've held multiple listening sessions with the jurisdictions and local bus providers. We've secured written agreements from our jurisdictions on their desired level of involvement, and we've collaboratively scoped the consultant service needs. And I will say that Houston kind of started this in 2012, started the network redesign process, but we have access to all those scopes, and we are closely following what many of our peers have done. And so we are prepared to commence procurement. So I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Raka Chaudhry, who's going to talk through progress on bus priority and customer experience strategies.
Great. Thanks, Allison. Good morning. I'm Raka Chaudhry. I manage the bus priority team and the capital program for bus priority at Metro. So that was also initiative H of the bus transformation project, so we can check that off. As part of my responsibilities, my team and I have been collaborating closely with the jurisdictions on implementing bus priority treatments, and DC has committed to installing over 60 miles of bus lanes in the next 6 to 8 years. So thank you so much for that. We're also implementing transit signal priority and queue jumps in DC, and rapidly expanding this work in Maryland and Virginia as well. Looking at the few bus lanes that we have, now we know that bus lanes are only effective if they are enforced. And to address that challenge, we have a program underway in coordination with DDOT now to launch a fully automated bus-mounted violation detection system in 2022. There are a number of factors on our roadways that slow buses down, but we have a whole toolkit that we can use to improve bus speed and reliability. If you look at this graph, you can see that buses would normally operate at free flow, and then there'd be some dips where there's signals, and then when buses stop at bus stops. But right now, because of traffic congestion, our speed is here, much lower than where free flow would be. So to address traffic congestion, we can do dedicated bus lanes and then enforce them. At traffic signals, we can implement transit signal priority and queue jumps. And then when buses slow down at bus stops, sometimes our bus stops are really close, so we can consolidate stops, or we can allow all-door boarding where there's really high boarding and ridership levels. And then also implement floating bus stops so buses don't have to weave in and out at stops. So our region has made a lot of progress in all these bus priority measures. Alexandria and Arlington got us started with the first BRT in dedicated lanes. Since then, DC has been implementing bus lanes at a really brisk pace since 2018. And then Montgomery County has launched their own flash BRT as well. So lots happening in the region, and we are really excited to be part of that big movement now. Q jumps is my team. One of the biggest main projects that we have right now is Q jumps. And we've been working with DC, and over the last year, we've rapidly increased the number of Q jumps in DC. We started off with 8 locations in 2020. This year, we have 15 locations. And by the end of this fiscal year, so by summer next year, we'll have 23. So it's moving really fast, and it's a great partnership. We are expanding this work into Maryland in this fiscal year. We've been meeting with our jurisdictional partners in Montgomery County and Prince George's County all summer long, and we are ready to kick off a contract to design construction-ready Q jumps for Montgomery County and Prince George's County. TSP is another really important project. It's our most mature project. We have approximately 250 intersections in DC and Virginia that are enabled for TSP. In DC, to improve performance of TSP, we have reassigned equipment from some downtown locations to new corridors. Equity was a very important consideration in our planning, and all our new corridors are in Northeast and Southeast DC. In Alexandria, too, we are adding another TSP corridor, Duke Street, in early 2022. So improved customer experience was the third strategy identified in the bus transformation projects. One of the recommendations within the strategy is to improve customer experience by providing riders with high quality information. In December 2020, in response to customer concerns during COVID, we added a feature that allows passengers to see crowding levels on buses as they track their real-time arrivals. So these little people icons show you how crowded the bus is as the bus is approaching your stop. Legible Maps was another recommendation that was identified to improve customer information. In September, when we launched the all-day frequent service network, we developed this map, and it shows the bus network overlaid on the rail network. So the thick lines show 12-minute headways or better, narrow lines show 20-minute headways, and then they also show where these routes intersect with the metro stations. Over the last year, we've also completed 2 important recommendations to make fare payments easier for our customers. We started off with fare payments on Apple devices in fall last year. Since early summer this year, riders can use both Apple and Android devices to pay their fares on their phones. And in September, we implemented free transfers between rail and bus. Safer and pleasant rides is also a key element of customer experience, which is why we've been advancing improvements to bus stops and bus shelters, technology to improve safety inside and outside buses, and we've updated our daily bus cleaning and sanitation SOPs in response to COVID. Here's a quick look at the new shelters. Our existing shelters are over 30 years old. They're rusting in places. The new shelters will be structural steel. They'll have solar panels and lighting and digital bus information screens. Some of these are in place. This image here is at the Braddock Road Metro Station. We know that customers in our region place a high value on being environmentally sustainable, and so do we as transit providers and riders. And to help get us there, we have launched a zero emissions vehicles program to deliver on our goal of a full zero emissions bus fleet by 2045. And then on the Regional Mobility Innovation Lab, we don't have the lab, but we know innovation doesn't stop with new technologies, and it doesn't happen in a vacuum. So we host a few regularly scheduled regional meetings with our jurisdictional partners. We try to meet monthly or bi-monthly, or in one case annually, but so we can get the best minds in the region together and keep learning from each other and continue to improve our policies, programs, and technologies. I will pass it back to Allison for the last update.
Great, thanks, Raka. So finally, strategy 4 focused on how the region as a whole, local bus providers, road operators, funding jurisdictions can better collaborate at all levels to make sure that we're implementing the recommendations from bus transformation, and just generally how do we create that more unified, integrated system for our customers. So this winter, Metro is going to launch a quarterly regional leadership meeting. So it's bringing together the senior leaders of the local bus providers, and it's an opportunity to build trust, identify, similar issues and challenges that many of us are facing, and provide that forum for finding solutions at the senior level. This is an approach that Los Angeles County's Municipal Operators Association started many years ago, and they've brought together 18 different operators to kind of think through what solutions to current problems where bus service should be moving forward. So like trying to bring all of that together at the senior level. And then secondly, we are Metro now has stepped up to create that independent progress report. And so many of you may know Metro now is a coalition of regional business leaders and advocates who have been supportive of transit overall. But the report is expected to be released in early 22. And they are engaging all of the local bus providers to gather progress across all of the different recommendations from all the different providers. Next slide. I think that's back to Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Allison and Raka. So for our major next steps, as you've just heard, Metro in the region and the jurisdictions have many things in motion to improve bus. The key area of focus for us in the near term will be the network redesign effort, as well as continued partnership with the jurisdictions and the departments of transportation on improvements to roadways to improve the speed and reliability of buses. The progress on these recommendations and the improved partnership and collaboration with our jurisdictional partners is also helping us to prepare for the federal infrastructure funding opportunities that we expect to see in the near term. So that concludes our presentation. And again, we thank you for the opportunity to provide this update. Thank you.
I want to thank you, Tom, and your team for a great presentation. And I'm sure we're probably going to have some questions from the board members. And I actually want to start off with just a couple of questions. So, and board members, okay, please use the raise hands function and I'll call on you. Let me start off on slide 13. It indicated that there were going to be bus stop consolidations. Are those only going to be considered in areas that are like not well known for having seniors who may not be able to walk as far? What is the criteria that you're thinking of using for those consolidations?
I can take this. Okay, I don't think we have a criteria at this point, but seniors will definitely be part of the consideration, and that has always been a consideration in bus stop consolidation. Right now, along some corridors, bus stops are 300 feet from each other, so that's every block. I think 14th Street is a good example. You stop at a traffic signal, and then you stop at a bus, and then bus stop, and then you go to the next bus stop, and then there's a traffic signal again. So it's instances like that where consolidation is really needed. And so I think we will work on some sort of Allison, do you want to add anything to it?
I was going to say in the service guidelines from last December, there are for each of the different service classifications, there are guidelines for that. It's not to your point, it is not a hard and fast rule, and it matters what is the topography, how busy are those bus stops? Are we, you know, are there many seniors in the area? So we will be going through that like methodically, but there are guidelines for what those distances should be, whether it's BRT, whether it's framework, whether it's coverage service.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that we had some guidelines or something, because I do know that when I'm riding the bus, often it seems like every block there's a bus stop. And when you're trying to get to where you're trying to get to on the bus, that can be that can be a bit much, as we stop at every bus stop. On slide 15, I don't know if you all just overlooked it, but it did not mention any type of partnership with Virginia yet for these Q jumps.
We have one location for a Q jump in Virginia. We haven't moved forward with Q jump designs, but we will continue to partner with them on that. Arlington has actually moved ahead with building their own Q jumps at some locations, and they painted them red. So Arlington has been moving forward. We just haven't been actively designing them for them yet. But as soon as we get some of our resources aligned properly, we will.
Okay, great. And then I just wanted to make a comment. As I was reviewing this presentation in advance of the meeting, and then listening to you all give additional input, I am just excited with the possibility of what we can do with the bus priority and the bus transformation with the infrastructure bill and funds that we could potentially get from that. And I know that WMATA is going to leverage it to the hilt. And I also want to make sure that jurisdictions, especially DC, that we also assist with that leveraging, because there are things that we can also do as we support our circulator buses that could also benefit WMATA. So, and I'm sure Virginia and Maryland are also looking at that. So I just look forward to us being able to move quickly to get our buses to where they need to be as it relates to those 4 strategies. So with that, I am going to call on, let me see whose hand was first. Okay, Tracy.
Hi, thanks for this presentation. I've got some questions about the scope of the bus network redesign. I am still trying to understand the extent to which the redesign will treat the bus network as an independent network versus understanding it as a network that is integrated with Metrorail. And how are we treating these networks, and do we have a vision moving forward for whether our goal is to have these networks be integrated, or whether we want to build in some duplication for resilience, or this is important for board policy going forward, because we need to understand how fare policies such as bus to rail transfer could make decisions within the bus network redesign contingent. So could you just catch me up to speed on what the thinking on that is?
Sure. So one thing we've found by looking at the data, slicing and dicing it, because obviously we have a lot of that information, is that the bus network, most bus customers do not touch the rail network on the trips that they're making. And we are in process of digging into this, but not finding a lot of trips that people make on the bus that could have been done on the rail, and like chose bus because it was cheaper, or they like to be on the street as opposed to in the tunnel, right? Whatever the case is. So thinking about the bus network as it is not wholly a standalone, right? We recognize there is some interplay, but really thinking about one of the initial steps will be understanding demand, understanding market assessment. Where are we competitive? Where are we not competitive? So that is kind of one of the early pieces to start driving, to have data and drive the conversation around what should the goals be for the network. So does that
I mean, sort of. There is a chicken egg situation here, or whether you want to call it like a spotlight problem, where the travel behavior of current users of the Metrorail and Metrobus systems is determined by the design of the current networks. So are bus riders not transferring to rail because there was a fare penalty for doing that until very recently? Are bus riders not transferring to Metrorail because the bus network is designed around extremely long single seat routes and prioritizes helping people avoid transfers, even when it means that we're creating routes that are more difficult to operate reliably, and not just more difficult, more expensive. So I just want to make sure that we don't enter the bus network redesign, allowing the limitations of the current system to limit the network I get on the other side. I will cry if I just see like a slightly simplified old bus network. We need to acknowledge that the current network restricts people's travel behavior, and that we're not going to have all the data that we need in order to envision the best possible bus network. I mean, just looking at the map of the current frequent bus service, there are no crosstown bus routes within DC included in that network, not a single one. And there are no bus routes that cross the Potomac River in that network. And when we're experiencing a service disruption on Metrorail, I think we're discovering more than ever that, like, we wish the bus network did things that it just doesn't do. So I'm concerned about, I want to make sure, please reassure me that the scope is not going to limit what we imagine is possible for the bus network. Okay, I'm particularly also concerned as we talk about bus priority, and also as we talk about electrifying the bus fleet, that the infrastructure that we're putting in place for these things might also limit the bus network redesign. If we're painting stuff, if we're like designing queue jumps and putting them in, and then we're saying we're going to move bus route, like, is the left hand talking to the right hand? Okay, like we're thinking about this, we're timing this.
Yes.
What's the timeline on the network redesign?
To start, so we have just entered procurement. And so that will take us, to get through our planning on-call task order contract. That gets about 4 to 5 months to get to a notice to proceed. And we're estimating, we've done a lot of pre-work, looking at what our peers have done. Alexandria took 22 months. LA County Metro took 30. So we are estimating somewhere in that range, months, to get through, because it's not just redesigning the network, it is building consensus around all of the things that you just mentioned and that's a lot of trade-offs, right? To understand, if we want, resilience of the rail network, what does that then mean for other, other service choices we can make? So it is really both redesigning the network and doing the technical work there, but it is building consensus, lots of outreach in terms of, coming back to the board, going to elected officials, talking to the public, jurisdictions, other bus operators. So that
Understood.
is the duration.
And yeah, and so it's just good to hear. I think the board needs to spend a lot of time in these conversations and to talk about this, because board policies around fares and and really understanding what our vision for how Metrobus and Metrorail work together, complement each other, et cetera. I think we need clarity and consensus on that. I absolutely agree. And so I look forward to those conversations. My last question is about all-door boarding. I could not understand from the presentation where we are at on that and what the timeline is. I'm new here. Could someone just get me up to speed on that real quick?
Raka, could you take that one, or would you like me to?
I think, yeah, I can respond to that. So it's all-door boarding. For all-door boarding to work, we need rear door targets installed. So it's part of that larger fare contract that's underway right now. We should, I believe we should be receiving our targets and installing the new fare boxes and rear door targets in the fall of 2022. So there's like so it should be installed over the summer and the fall. So late 22 is when we will be able to start piloting all-door board.
Oh, okay, understood. So we're currently redesigning the Farebox. And so, for example, like I boarded yesterday and it's like not actually super obvious that you can pay with your phone. I saw someone do it on the S9. Like somebody figured it out. but you know, I mean, you know how like in New York now, like when you go to pay, it's like, whoa, it's this crazy new thing. And it's like super obvious that like everything's changed, like about how you pay. So we're on target to have new fare boxes that can work on the front and the back in the fall. Fantastic.
So for the back, we're going to start with 50 rear door targets, and then we'll pilot it and study that.
There's no need to go nuts and rush into anything when we could test it out.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Director Letourneau.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to follow on for just one brief second on Tracy's comments about sort of the integration issue, I would also just add to that the integration with the other local systems that are carrying a lot of weight in Virginia and Maryland. And I know that is a discussion that's happening. I think the Virginia outreach to the elected officials has occurred early on in the process, and now we're sort of at the point where we're circling back. But I think one of the sort of more existential type of questions that we have to face with the network is sort of that redundancy issue with some of the other operators and who should be covering what, and then what the implications are for subsidy in that discussion. Because if, you know, increasingly different Virginia systems or Maryland systems are covering routes that used to be metro routes, then that is going to have to be reflected in what those jurisdictions are contributing. And that is a very frequent topic of conversation that you hear amongst the elected officials from those jurisdictions. The question I wanted to ask, though, is actually just wondering, so we implemented, and it was referenced in this presentation, the high frequency bus network in September. And so I know it's only been, you know, a month or two, but is there any information to be gleaned from that in terms of, you know, what type of success that's had? Are we seeing, you know, you may not have this data at your hands or be able to tell us right now, but I think it would be really valuable to understand as we kind of embark on this, you know, are riders responding to that differently? You know, are we getting more than we might have otherwise expected in terms of ridership jumps on those routes? So I just wanted to bring that up and see if there's anything you could tell us.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Letourneau. I think you know, you know, fundamentally it's a little too early to draw conclusions. We are seeing increased ridership in the places where we improve frequency, which you would expect. You know, generally here, I prefer to wait to the 6 months period to do an assessment of that. But certainly we can and will provide the board updates and data as it's available here.
Yeah, and I think the important thing is that we sort of plug it into this process and, you know, take the information that we've gotten, you know, in both in terms of operating information, you know, how successful we are keeping those things on schedule and so on, but also how riders are responding, and kind of use that, you know, to help guide the entire network discussion. So, you know, it's almost like it's sort of a little bit of a beta for us on things that we could do as we look at the whole system. So it's, yeah, not so much that we have to have the answers to those questions right now, but that we're integrating that. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we have Director Klein.
Great, thank you. This has been a really helpful presentation, and I just have to say how excited I am to hear that the network redesign is in procurement now, because I don't think we can understate how important that is. This is really a generational opportunity, as Tracy was saying earlier, to re-envision what the bus network can be. We haven't really had that opportunity over the last several decades. So this is a really important opportunity. I'm glad it's proceeding. Can you say a little bit about what the opportunities will be for public engagement in the redesign process? Is that a one-time outreach, or are there multiple points at which bus riders particularly will be engaged?
Thank you. So as mentioned, engagement for the public, elected officials, jurisdictions is kind of the bedrock of doing this work, right? We can't get to a system that is implementable and adoptable and implementable without getting that consensus. So we are proposing multiple touches, right? It's, we need to set goals. We need to get consensus on goals. There will be draft scenarios, right, to kind of give the range of here's what it could be if we really wanted to like go full on about frequent service, or really wanted to do coverage and like understand and get feedback on that. And then also to, get out for the whatever the recommended outcomes are. So that's at least at a minimum what we're thinking about. We have, we are using consultant support on this. Because many of them have done this for our peers. And so getting that brain trust and how others have approached this, I think, is also really helpful and can give us some creative, different ways of thinking about it. So it's a combination of that.
Great, thanks. I'm actually curious on the bus transformation project itself. Do you have statistics or data on what the demographics were of the public participation side of that? I'm curious, to what extent it was representative of the region at large, the bus riders in particular. Is that available?
We definitely, we do. I will say I did not retain that from 3 years ago. So I can get that. I can send that through the board secretary to get you that information. Sure.
That would be great. Thank you. A couple of other questions on this. I'm also particularly interested in some of the techniques and strategies to increase the speed of buses on our region's roadways. Obviously, that 9% decline in speed over the last decade is rather disturbing. It sounds like you're making good progress, particularly in DC with the queue jumps. Are there lessons learned or things we should be thinking about as the board to encourage this process to move even faster throughout the region? How can we see more of this happen faster?
So I think sometimes there are difficult trade-offs, especially for transit signal priority. You have to prioritize the main line of traffic, which means maybe 3 to 4 seconds more of waiting on the side streets. And you will have residents come and complain to elected officials about that. I think making those tough decisions and making calls and persevering through some of that so we have the benefits to share would really be helpful. But yeah, there are some trade-offs. It's definitely more difficult for DOT officials because they are trying to balance more things. For us, our customers are not going to come complain to us when the buses are moving faster, but they have that to balance. But in the long run, it is beneficial for the regions, I think, pushing that forward. But yeah, I think that's anything else, Tom, to add to that?
I'll just add that the again the investment opportunity here. I mean, it's going to take a significant amount of money for our regional partners to invest in roadways to improve the speed and reliability of buses. So again, at the federal level, that opportunity really presents something for us in the region.
If I may, this is Paul Wiedefeld. If I may add, just one other lesson that we've learned, obviously, is the enforcement issue. It's one thing to have a lane marked, but if people are double parking and deliveries are still occurring, then it basically it collapses right around that. And I know the district has been very aggressive, in that area because that is the key. Otherwise, it falls apart pretty quick.
Great, thank you. Well, I hope that oh, was there another comment on that? Okay, I hope that you all persevere and that we can help move these things forward even faster, because they have been shown to make a significant difference in reliability and in the ability to keep your frequent service at the headways it's supposed to be. I think these are maybe subtle to some extent. You don't necessarily know, everybody doesn't know, oh, this traffic signal does this, or, you know, what it might be, but they are extremely important. And just to follow up on the federal infrastructure legislation, just briefly, there are so many opportunities in the bill that has passed, with more that to come potentially if additional bills pass. I do hope the region will think about a coordinated approach to those opportunities. There are so many grants, and obviously we have a number of needs in the region, but I think that we'll be benefited by thinking regionally and kind of not competing amongst each other, but rather presenting an entire package of solutions to really make a difference in the region as a whole. One last question, and it kind of has to do with, actually two, sorry, one quick one. You mentioned coordination of regional passes among all the different providers, and I think it said in progress or working on it or something like that. Can you say a little bit more about what the timeline looks like there?
Sure. So that is really to say we have a monthly pass and allowing other bus providers to. Originally, it was Metrorail as a monthly pass, right? And then we added Metrobus 2 years ago. It was pre-pandemic, and then this is working with the other local bus providers to then allow some of them. That said, as I think many of you know, some of them are actually moving to free service. So that is it is kind of free service. So it is a work in progress. I don't actually have details on timing for the ones that are not free yet.
Okay, well, we can follow up on that, and it leads into my final question, which is there's a lot of information here and a lot of different threads. Obviously, this has been a helpful presentation in reminding us on what the priorities are and kind of how to track it. I understand Metro now is coming out with a report or scorecard of some sort soon. And I think there was something in the presentation that suggested the board would get annual updates, perhaps on the overall project, but I'd like to suggest that we get a more frequent reporting than that. We can, maybe you can advise on what a schedule would be that would make sense. But I feel like it's been a while since the board has had a presentation on this, probably a year or so. And I think we would benefit from more regular updates on progress as we go forward. So that's my final comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Zappi.
Thanks so much. Hi, Chris Zappi, sitting in for Secretary Slater. Thanks so much for the presentation. It's really exciting. Just a quick question. You may have covered this in prior presentations, but I'm wondering if you could share just a rough order of magnitude for the time it takes and the cost to implement TSP or queue jumping at a given intersection.
So it takes some time because so queue jumps, we've been talking to DC for the last 2 or 3 years, I think 3 years, and then it took a year of planning. We did a study, identified 42 intersections that are good locations because the roadway geometry has to work, as well as the turning movements, the right turning traffic volumes. There are a number of things that we have to take into account. So we did a study with DC, identified 42 locations that were good locations and for queue jumps. And then after that, we had to get a contract in order to get the design work done. So, so we managed to have a good partnership that took about maybe a year to set it up. And then we have a good cadence going, and we are doing like 5 to 6 queue jumps every year. With Montgomery County and Prince George's County, we started talking to them early summer this year. So there's a tool that we created to look at where bus congestion is and where the slowdown spots are. Went to the jurisdiction, started talking to them. We have a contract starting to do the design work on that this December. So it takes a little while to get it started and going. The construction cost itself of queue jumps is not that high. It's another signal head. So it's not that expensive. Usually if we stay within the right of way, it's not that expensive, but it really is. With TSP, there is, again, some more planning with that. You have to work through do signal design, figure out how much time they have at traffic signals, how the prioritization. There's a lot of traffic engineering that happens in the background. So for the new corridors, it took us about 9 months to get the design complete for DC, and then they go into effect with the bus schedules, because that's how the buses are enabled for these particular routes. So everything is about a 9-month maybe lead up, but we're trying to, once we get started, it moves faster.
Gotcha. Yep, that makes sense. And the 9 months, that's for like a batch of corridors, right?
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was 40 intersections.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, Tom, Allison, Raka, I want to thank you all again for a great presentation. And absolutely, the board does want to keep updated on, the bus transformation project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
you.
further business to come before the committee, we stand adjourned. I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Drummer to begin the Safety and Operations Committee meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Babers, and good morning, and welcome to the Safety and Operations Committee meeting. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. If there are no objections, we'll consider the agenda approved as presented. Are there any objections from members of the committee? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Now, approval of the minutes from our meeting on the 14th of October. Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. So we have two information updates on today's agenda. Our first item is an update on the Silver Line Phase 2, and it includes the status of open issues, key activities and testing required before declaring operational readiness, an overview of the safety certification process, and the status of hiring actions. And in the second item, we'll receive an update on Metro's Office of Emergency Management. In May, this responsibility was transferred from the Metro Transit Police Department to the Department of Safety and Environmental Management. And today's update will include changes that are taking place since that realignment and how those changes contribute to Metro's implementation of its safety management system. I'll turn the floor over to Andy Off at this point.
Oh, good morning, Chair Drummer and committee members. Andy Off here. As Chair Drummer noted, we'll walk through status of open issues, look at the schedule leading up to our next major milestone, the operational readiness date. Then I'll be joined by my colleagues, Ms. Impastato and Mr. Leader, to talk about safety certification and staffing respectively. In terms of open issues, not much change from the last update. One unresolved issue, the UPS system that's integral to some of our power equipment. We don't foresee this being a showstopper to ORD, but it is still an issue we need to resolve. The 6 issues underneath are all underway. Most of these just require operational testing in running trains, which will be taking care of that over the course of the next few weeks. In terms of activities leading up to the operational readiness date, as the team may be aware, MWA declared substantial completion on Package A, the mainline track between Wheelie-Reston and Ashburn on October 25th. They still not have declared substantial completion for Package B or the yard, but we do expect that shortly. After substantial completion, we enter a phase called the Operational Readiness Testing Phase, in which Metro and the Airports Authority conduct operational tests, run a version of simulated service we refer to as the system performance demonstration, and work through the punch list. The third bullet there, just to share, verbatim what's in the cooperative agreement. Metro, solely has the right to declare the operational readiness date. And as you can see here, the definition is fairly broad, and it's based upon our degree of comfort that the system is ready to begin simulated service. The two
Andy, if I could just ask you to
Yes, sir.
slides full screen, so it'll be a little easier to read.
Sir, you may be testing my technical skills or lack thereof here. Let me. Does that look any better?
Yes, that's correct. That's better. It's easier to read that way. Thank you, Andy.
Okay. No, sorry about that. The two quantitative items that we'll be tracking moving forward is the punch list. And as folks could imagine on a project of this magnitude, you know, we'll be in the thousands, but we'll work through those. Some of those which may bleed into our simulated service period, but certainly those would not be things that would prohibit that. In terms of our operational readiness tests, we're making good progress with about 40% complete on both the main line and the yard. Just to lay out some of the milestones as we review this on each update straight out of the cooperative agreement, we are now in the operational readiness testing phase. The next dated milestone is the operational readiness date. So there is no time constraint over the operational readiness testing phase. And referring back to the cooperative agreement definition, it's really based upon you know, our degree of confidence that the system is ready to enter the next phase, which is the pre-revenue excuse me, activity phase. Pre-revenue activity defined as approximately a 90-day period, you know, where Joe and my team will focus on, you know, outfitting the system, you know, moving equipment into the yard and preparing that for service, and getting our employees ready to serve our customers. And next, I will be followed by Teresa to talk about safety certification. Ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roth. Safety certification as a review is a series of activities that include design reviews, inspections, testing, hazard and risk assessment, and analytics, which occur throughout the project lifecycle to assure the safety of the system and to mitigate any hazards to an acceptable level. Safety certification begins in project development, progresses throughout the engineering and design phases, oversees and is heavily involved in construction testing and simulations. Safety certification is a requirement prior to the initiation of passenger service. The safety certification process is overseen by entities independent of the project management team, but work is closely coordinated with the project managers. For the Silver Line Phase 2 project, safety certification is well underway and involves a number of distinct groups working to assess and ensure the safety of the system. On this next slide, I'll review those groups and their interrelations. Under the oversight of the Washington Metrorail Safety Commission, both the Airports Authority and Metro are responsible for safety certification activities of the project. The Airports Authority is responsible for the certification of the rail infrastructure system, including the main line, stations, and yard areas. Metro has provided technical oversight of the Airport Authority's certification program and is working closely with the project team at MWA to address open items as we prepare to proceed into the operational readiness assessment process. At that point, Metro will transition to become responsible for the certification of the operational readiness of the system. We will continue to provide updates on the progress of our certification to the board in the future. I'd now like to hand the presentation over to my colleague, Mr. Joe Leader, who will review Metro's efforts with regard to hiring.
Okay, next slide. Thank you. In order to operate, first off, my name is Joe Leader, Chief Operating Officer here at Washington Metro. Good morning, Ms. Chair Drummer. In order to operate Silver Line Phase 2, we need 468 employees with various titles. To date, at the end of October, we had 215 hired on the property and are currently going through training, slightly below where we thought we might be at 220, but we still feel very confident that we'll be able to fill all these positions. At this time, based on the various titles that we have that need to operate Silver Line Phase 2, 95% of them, of the titles are actively being recruited. Next slide. At this time, about 47% of the positions have been filled. Our next target of high recruitment will be in January, where we're going to start bringing in our Archer staff, which will be 60 train operators and 25 station managers. We are hoping to graduate 5 interlocking operators at the end of December, and we're still actively recruiting MTPD officers, which is a very tough title to get. And that is my update.
So thank you, Mr. Leader, Mr. Off, Mr. Impastato. If you have any questions, please use the raise hand function. Seeing none, we'll transition to the next presentation by Jamie Johnson.
Mr. Drummer, I'd like to introduce Jamie. Mr. Jamie Johnson is our Assistant Chief Safety Officer. Jamie joined the safety team in July with responsibility for safety oversight. He leads what is currently the Office of Emergency Management, and next month he will take over the safety assurance teams, namely safety investigations, data and analytics, and operations safety oversight. Jamie joined Metro in 2017, and with his diverse experience, launched the Office of Strategic Initiatives under Mr. Joe Leader, our Chief Operating Officer. And most recently, Jamie led the Culture Change Initiative in the Rail Operations Control Center. He's well placed to lead change in the field of emergency preparedness, as he spent 10 years with the Metropolitan Police in London, where he led a number of emergency preparedness initiatives. Recognizing the opportunity to synergize efforts and enhance the safety of our customers, the General Manager realigned the Office of Emergency Management from Metro Transit Police into the Department of Safety in May of this year. This has given us the opportunity to take a fresh look at emergency management at Metro and to determine how best to prevent, respond, and mitigate incidents and emergencies. Jamie's presentation today explains how Metro intends to take our emergency management functions to the next previous meeting. I'll now turn the floor over to Mr. Johnson.
Hey, I'm sorry, there was like a connection issue and I actually missed the last thing that you said. Could you repeat the last sentence?
Sure, I can take it from here if people can hear me clearly. So Teresa just finished by saying, the presentation today tends to outline how we are taking emergency management to the next level and how it is aligned to the safety management system, which has been discussed with the committee in previous meetings. So thank you very much, Chair Drummer and members of the committee. And what I thought I'd start out by providing some kind of context. I'd first like to explain what the emergency management function currently involves and what I've found since taking over the team this summer. Anytime an incident occurs on a bus, train, or at a rail yard, bus division, or an administrative building, or when severe weather or large crowds are present in the DC region, our riders and colleagues will see and turn to Metro's operations personnel, such as train or bus operators, station managers, maintenance crews, or frontline supervisors, who all report to the Chief Operating Officer, Joe Leader. The Office of Emergency Management is less visible and smaller in number, but are responsible for ensuring the whole agency is ready to respond and recover from incidents and disasters. Of note, in 2008, Metro led transit in North America by being one of the first transit agencies to establish a team solely dedicated to emergency management. And Metro was the blueprint for emergency management that others replicated. But now the current team provides a critical coordination and support function. One side of the team, you'll see on this slide, owns the response plans and ensures all departments know what to do when an emergency hits. The team also ensures Metro and the fire and police departments across the jurisdictions have practiced and exercised the emergency plans together. And the team provides technical support during emergencies, such as facilitating communication, which is critical within Metro and with other partner agencies outside Metro. The other side of the team provides training to colleagues and regional fire and police departments, and they perform critical specialist roles to ensure safe operations in the control centres, and also they deploy to incidents to provide specialist support and advice for incident commanders on the ground. Our intent is to grow and improve emergency management at Metro, but it's important to note that the current team has significant strengths and capabilities, and this isn't a case of starting from scratch, but instead building on what we already have. There is an extensive and regularly revised set of emergency plans in place and a mature and ambitious exercise program, giving numerous departments, staff and external agencies opportunities to practice and prepare for emergencies. The current staff range from a former brigadier general to former battalion chiefs and police supervisors and former FEMA specialists, namely Federal Emergency Management Agency. Coveted by other transit agencies and fire departments, we also have a well-regarded training facility at Carmen Turner with a simulation track and a rollover train to simulate the challenging environment that Metro that faces response teams, initial primary responders when they arrive on Metro turf. And all this results in Metro benefiting from very deep professional partnerships established by the emergency management team with jurisdictional agencies and numerous committees on the Council of Governments. So with regards to the strategic context, there are opportunities for improvement which will directly impact the safety of riders and colleagues at Metro. These opportunities relate to adopting best practice while also innovating to support the agency's safety goals. The emergency management action plan, the emergency preparedness action plan, I should say, I'm about to describe, is carefully and intentionally in support of and feeding into the establishment of an agency-wide safety management system, as outlined in the agency safety plan, which this committee approved last month. And now I will explain the plan. So it's in 4 parts. Firstly, a new strategy. Secondly, a new team. Thirdly, a new framework for the agency to operate under when managing incidents. And lastly, targeted improvement of some very specific emergency management tools and systems. So the first action, the new strategy. The change in the office's name from emergency management to emergency preparedness is more than a gesture, but represents a change in philosophy, emphasizing preparation, prevention, and mitigation as much as response and recovery. In order to achieve our vision of once again leading transit in North America in the area of emergency management, we will expand our scope and replicate both FEMA's best practice cycle, which is pictured here on the right, and also adopt the principles of the safety management system. But what does that mean in practice? Well, what it does mean is that we will proactively and professionally, systematically do certain things to implement the cycle shown on the right here. We will identify the hazards that cause incidents or make an incident worse. Site inspections, organizational or regional risk assessments, or post-incident debriefs are great ways of doing that. We will prioritize those hazards that we find based on the risk they pose to our riders and colleagues. And then we will design mitigations both before and after incidents occur, such as repairing a fault, redesigning a process or the layout of a building, or remedying communication gaps. And communication is often the challenge when multiple departments in an agency or multiple agencies working together. That communication is something we really must concentrate on. And then we will track and coordinate the execution of those mitigations in an organized and professional way, which ultimately means we'll be using data to systematically manage our activities and resources better, which means we'll be more mature and sophisticated in how we handle incidents, and my team will be a significant contributor to the agency's safety management system. But most important of all, our riders and colleagues should see a reduction in the severity of incidents and also the likelihood of incidents occurring in the first place. So this approach that I've outlined here underpins the other elements of the plan, and these next elements will allow us to implement this. So we're growing and restructuring our emergency preparedness team to make implementation of the strategy possible. You'll see 3 new teams make up the new office on the right here. And together, the 3 teams combine to replicate FEMA's best practice emergency management cycle. For example, the prevention and mitigation team on the right will perform the role of identifying and prioritizing hazards and driving forward corrective actions to reduce risk, focusing on systems and risk management, which will ultimately drive the activities of the other two teams. And to do this, we're expanding the skill set of the team, recruiting talent with new skills in instructional design, systems engineering, and risk management to supplement and complement the planners and master exercises and incident commanders that we already have, who I mentioned earlier. Critical to prevention and mitigation of incidents, the fire life safety professionals in Metro currently will also realign to join the team. And we're on track to fill our positions well ahead of the spring, targeting a launch of the new team in January. Third part of the 4-part action plan is that Metro manages incidents every day and the vast majority are handled well. But there is a broad agreement and ambition across leadership that we can and need to do better, with an emphasis on urgency, consistency, and flexibility in how we manage our resources to keep riders and colleagues safe. With support and close collaboration with other departments, including right from the general manager through the Metro Transit Police, the control centres, rail, bus, and the security control centre as well, and the operational teams in bus, rail, and Metro Access, the Office of Emergency Preparedness is almost like the quarterback leading an initiative to improve and reframe how we manage incidents, and how we make decisions, and importantly, how we communicate. Central to this is a position staffed by emergency preparedness specialists in the Rail Operations Control Centre. The Mission Assurance Coordinator is the Chief Safety Officer's representative in the Control Centre 24/7, who, while outside the National Incident Management System chain of command, is authorised to take action to ensure decisions and communications are effective and safe. We intend to draft, test, and test again the framework documentation in the coming months and start training the thousands of individuals, Metro employees, in different roles across the organisation this summer. And lastly, the fourth and final part of the emergency preparedness plan is targeting some specific critical tools and processes to rapidly improve the content and quality of support we provide to colleagues and partners in fire and police departments. In partnership with the Council of Governments and FEMA, we're accelerating our organisational risk assessment data. We need to get ahead of the fast-changing environment in which we operate, like any other organisation, whether it be more extreme weather patterns or domestic or international terrorism. And we are committed to understanding the changing hazards and the needs of our diversifying ridership, in particular, catering for the hazards that face our more vulnerable riders, such as the young, disabled, or other individuals with specific needs. And our way to proactively respond to those threats is to ensure our plans are up to scratch, preparing to mitigate the right hazards and so reduce the risk for riders. As you've heard, the training we deliver to colleagues and fire and police departments in the region is a critical part of what we do, and we're accelerating work to standardise it, improve the quality, and increase confidence in the product we deliver. All these targeted initiatives are in the works, and I'm proactively pushing procurements to ensure progress in the next calendar year, so riders and colleagues will start to see tangible changes. And that concludes my presentation. Obviously, very happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ms. Estado and Mr. Johnson. I just want to say and applaud to you, the team, the general manager, that this is transformative and it's critical to success in the long run. And what's most impressive about this is your total system focus. And this transition is not an easy lift. We get that. And the planning, preparation, management, assurance, and response coverage that you're already engaged in is well thought out and well planned, and look forward to seeing where you go from this point forward. So I'll open the floor at this point to members of the committee and the rest of the board if you have questions. Ms. Lowe?
Thank you. I second what Mr. Drummer just said. And I would say also that in the kind of thinking in the really big picture regarding incident and emergency response, the way it's currently done at WMATA. It'd be helpful for me if, and I understand we may not have time to do this right now, but like, I'd like to be able to think through how these proposed changes are different from the way that we respond now. And because I see in your presentation, I felt like there weren't like explicit callouts, but these plans seem quite responsive to a number of the critiques that WMSC and others have had over how specific incident responses have gone, and kind of what changes need to happen in order for, to the point you just said about reducing the number of incidents and also, responding to the incidents that do happen more effectively. So it'd be helpful if you could connect the dots for me on how these changes are responsive to some of these specific incidents that have happened. And whether that's something we do at a future committee meeting, or if an example immediately comes to mind, it'd just be helpful for me in terms of connecting those dots.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Slow. So we respond well to incidents. We have highly trained teams across the organization who respond quickly and have the skills and the experience to do a good job. But where I think we as an organization, the WMSC and the public get frustrated is that sometimes we're not as good as we could be, and it's inconsistent. And I think that's frustrating for everyone involved, and it poses risk. Where we're trying to improve is that very often, because it's the area where you can feel like you make a strong impact, is response. You can focus on response and you can do it well. But if the other elements of the cycle that I showed earlier aren't, we don't have a system in place to feed the data to improve our response and prevent incidents from occurring or prevent severity of an incident growing, we're always going to be just responding. And as staff churn and processes change, response can only improve to a certain degree on its own. So what we're trying to do is build the other parts of the cycle to ensure that we improve and don't frustrate our riders, WMSC, and ourselves by not making that progress and not making similar mistakes. That's what's frustrating, and that's what we're trying to solve. And I would be very, very happy to take you to the Rail Operations Control Center, the Bus Operations Control Center, and show you how it works, where some of our gaps are with communication and decision making, and we're trying to fill those gaps. So it's a complete circle of activities, not just response.
Yeah, I sense that from your presentation. I mean, I think that it's been widely covered in the media, nothing too crazy has ever happened to me while using transit, but when there have been incidents in the past, there's been and in the WMSC kind of after action, reviews, I often see them mentioning issues in the ROC, for example. So I think that it's really great news for everyone that you feel like you're wrapping your head around like what's going on there and what needs to change, and that absolutely a systems approach is the way to go.
And something to note there is that there are many areas that we are improving in. The ROCC is a great example. We're making significant progress under Andy Off, who just spoke before me. Culturally and systematically, getting the right people in place who know how to build these systems and then building them and following through. And the ROCC is one piece of the puzzle, and I'm trying to coordinate other ones alongside the ROCC.
Okay. So I don't see any other hands raised at this point, and I don't have any further comment. So at this point, with no further business to come before this committee, I'll turn the floor. We will adjourn, and I'll turn the floor over to Ms. Babers.
Thank you, Mr. Drummer. Good morning. I'm Lucinda Babers, first vice chair of the WMATA board. Thank you for being here today at our board of directors meeting. Before we begin, I'll ask Ms. Ellison, board corporate secretary, to please call the roll.
Thank you. Alternate Director Aguirre.
Present.
Vice Chair Babers.
Present.
Vice Chair Slater. I don't think he's back yet. So Alternate Director Zappi.
Present.
Director Klein.
Present.
Director Letourneau.
Present.
Director Lowe.
Present.
Director Drummer.
Present.
Director Martin Proctor.
Present.
Madam Vice Chair, you have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. First, we have the approval of the agenda. If there are no objections, I'd like to consider the agenda approved as presented. Any objections? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. We have 3 sets of minutes for approval. October 28th, 2021 board meeting, executive sessions from October 28th, 2021, and November 4th, 2021. I'd like to consider these minutes approved as presented. Any objections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Thank you. Now for public comment and reports by advisory bodies. First, we will hear from customers and stakeholders who submitted comments for the board. Please begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Public comments for today, November 18, 2021. From Brian Jablonski, everyone on the board should resign. This is the worst metro system in the country, and you put us all at risk. I hope you all, explicit language, die. From Andy Colton, District of Columbia, I appreciate the WMATA's board willingness to explore further modifications to service or affordability to accelerate the return of WMATA's passengers to pre-pandemic levels. While I appreciate these, I am concerned that these incentives don't fairly target the working and under-resourced populations most in need of them. Reducing fares for poorest residents, e.g. through transferring credits to those below federal poverty level, earning IETC, or otherwise would do more to boost ridership than including a fare credit upon reloading one's Metro card. Additionally, extending Metrorail service hours would help accommodate those working multiple jobs or later shifts. If Metro is serious about boosting ridership and uplifting those struggling in the DMV, you must extend incentives that meet their obstacles. Thank you. Our final comment from Gerald Ramsey, District of Columbia. The Benning Road Metro is poorly managed, and often people are smoking cigarettes and marijuana in the station, and the station managers do nothing about it. Many riders evade fares. Management turns a blind eye. I see that the station managers have become complacent and comfortable in their positions, offering no level of acceptable customer service. I have yet to see these issues resolved. The bus drivers of the U5 and U7 continue to arrive earlier than scheduled, causing many riders to be stranded and late for work. As this is my main source of transportation, yearly I spend over $2,000 on Metro collectively. Location 53rd and Fitch stop, number 1000580. These drivers are not adhering to the schedule. Given that this is my only method of transportation, my next step is to contact the board of directors and the president of the company to help resolve this issue. I would like for someone to follow up and help resolve these ongoing issues. That concludes the comments for today.
Thank you to everyone who submitted comments. Next, we'll hear from the Accessibility Advisory Committee Chair, Phil Posner. Phil, the floor is yours.
Madam Chairwoman, thank you. Good morning. And for one of the rare times this month, good news. Transportation Secretary Buttigieg will control $126 billion in new spending over the next 5 years. Hopefully, WMATA will receive funds sufficient to sustainably implement and maintain its safe, accessible, sustainable service, either directly or through the jurisdictions. The AAC and its constituents are ready to help as we can to achieve this funding. This is becoming a regular part of the report for this month. I'd like to welcome Dr. Lowe to the board. Seems we have a new board member every meeting. She arrives at a perfect time as the AAC has been working with staff from WMATA as well as DC, Montgomery County, and Arlington to improve the accessibility and safety of the new and planned floating bus stops. There are 10 stops in Montgomery County in various stages of design. Some of these stops are county projects, whereas others are private developers. The AAC recommended stop signs at the floating bus stops, alerting bicyclists and scooter riders to stop for pedestrians. The stop sign would make it safer for all, particularly those who are blind or have low vision. The AAC hopes that the floating stops would ensure safety of persons with disabilities as well as cyclists. And you know we've invited everybody to come, and Lucinda, you have come and been wonderful. And it would be great if Dr. Lowe would share her expertise with the AAC at the full meeting or at the bus rail subcommittee to talk about the bus stops. The director of Montgomery County floating bus stops worried that there was no national level of need or design for the bus stops other than the ADA that currently exists. We suggested to him that he requests that the board and their government lobbyists contact Senator Tammy Duckworth, who lives in the area and is a very strong advocate. And a message from Senator Duckworth, Senator Van Hollen, Senator Carlin to Secretary Buttigieg would really move TCA forward in establishing national standards for these bus stops. In addition to floating bus stops, the committee discussed the continuing evolution of metro access towards a post-pandemic era. This includes new sedan design and purchase, new van design and purchase, transit efficiency and safety, as well as the possible future for all electric and autonomous vehicles within the fleet. I want to repeat that there is strong support for the new fare policies and desire for a sustainable flat fare based upon the senior disability fare on bus rail extended to the metro access fare. Also, having multi-use passes for subscription trips on metro access similar to those offered to the general public for bus and rail. Thank you for your time. Best wishes for Thanksgiving and an early Hanukkah, Christmas, and Kwanzaa. And nothing but good news for the rest of the year. Thank you so much. I love to see you smiling.
Well, thank you, Phil. And your updates are always so informative. And I know that Director Lowe would probably like to take you up on your offer to come and visit. I do see her. Director Lowe, do you have any
I really
comment?
would love to visit. So please let me know in the next meeting.
And I'll let you know that all of our members do read GGW.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And one of the original board members was a former member of the RAC that both Patrick Sheehan and I worked with.
We'd love to get a contribution from you, Phil.
Oh, happy to do that. The check is in the mail.
I
Now
meant
it's okay
a
that
written
I've seen the
contribution to
ethics
the
training.
publication.
Phil, did you hear? She said a written contribution to the publication. Yes. Okay.
We will be happy to do that. We will be very happy to do that. If I might also respond to Director Klein's question during the safety movement, and that is the increase of speed for the buses. I was part of the transformation project, bus transformation project. And one of the things that was recommended by the community members to increase the speed of buses, since a lot of the speed is lost in boarding and exiting. And the rear boarding is great, but one of the great things that Seattle uses is free fare. And I know WMATA has experimented with no cash to speed things up, but no fare would speed it up even more. And again, that was one of the suggestions given to the bus transformation project by a number of the groups based upon the experiences elsewhere. And of course, it has to be a sustainable no fare. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Phil. Do we have any questions for the AAC? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Thank you, Phil.
My pleasure as always, and my best to Mr. Bolger. I miss his questions.
I will pass that on to him. Thank you.
Thank you.
Today, I have the honor of welcoming Metro's newest board member, Mr. Christopher Zappi. As noted earlier, he will be serving as an alternate director from Maryland. Chris serves on the Washington Suburban Transit Commission and is a director at Amtrak, focused on transportation policy strategy and partnerships. In prior roles at Amtrak, he managed a team responsible for improving the on-time performance of Amtrak trains operating on host railroads, which account for 97% of Amtrak's route network. In addition, he led the development and implementation of a successful bid to operate the MARC Penn Line commuter rail service in Maryland, launched Amtrak's partnership with Lyft, and advised the CEO and executive team on corporate strategy. Previously, he worked in infrastructure investing at Goldman Sachs in strategy and operation roles at GE Energy and Accenture. Chris, welcome. Please raise your right hand so I may formally swear you in your new role. Please repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Christopher Zappi,
Do hereby solemnly swear
do hereby solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland
and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and support the Constitution and the laws thereof,
and that I will, to the best of my skill and judgment,
and that I will, to the best of my skill and judgment,
diligently and faithfully, without partiality or prejudice,
diligently and faithfully, without partiality or prejudice,
execute the office of alternate director,
execute the office of alternate director
Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority,
of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority,
according to the Constitution and laws of this state.
according to the Constitution and laws of this state.
Thank you, Chris. Would you like to say a few words?
Thanks so much, Madam Chair, and thank you to Montgomery County and Maryland for this opportunity. I'm really looking forward to working with the board and WMATA staff to deliver safe and reliable service today and make the necessary investments to meet the future needs of the region. Thanks so much.
Thank you again, Chris. Lastly, as a reminder for next month, our board and committee meetings will take place on one day, December 9th. This concludes my report. I'll now turn the floor over to the GM for his report. Mr. Whitfield.
Good morning and thank you. First, I want to talk about a brief update on Metrorail. With the 7000 series rail cars out of service, we've been monitoring rail car crowding across the system. While passenger crowding on the trains increased in October when the 7000 series was initially removed from service, At this point, most crowding has leveled out with peaks in the range of 60 to 80 passengers per car during the busiest times of the day. That remains below pre-COVID crowding levels, and at off peaks, passenger loads are much lower. Just to give you a perspective, during pre-COVID, peak levels be roughly between 110 and 120 passengers per car, to give you some perspective. We've seen improvements since increasing service on multiple lines over the past few weeks, including additional trains on the green, yellow, and red lines. Last week, 93% of trains arrived within 15 minutes of their schedule. That's a 10% percentage point improvement from first week the 7Ks were out of service. I do acknowledge, obviously, the difficulties our customers face with the current service levels, but each week we're improving service and giving our customers more reliable transportation throughout the region. I also want to encourage our riders to use the live train map at WMATA.com for accurate next train times at their stations, as well as to see the locations of trains on each line. Moving forward, we will continue to monitor the crowding levels and adjust service to match the demand wherever possible. I'd like to talk also to give you an update on the fare modernization program. We're installing new fare gates, is making progress across the system with work conducted overnight outside of passenger service hours. So far, approximately 20% of the 125 station mezzanines have the modern stainless steel fare gates in service. This includes Gallery Place Station, a major transfer station with 3 separate mezzanines, which is now fully complete. Braddock Road Station in Alexandria has also recently been completed. By this time next year, we expect to have completed the installation of new fare gates across the rail system. And as was brought up earlier in the bus transformation update, we're also updating the fare boxes on the bus system as well, and that's in roughly the same time period. The new technology does require customers to stop using the smart trip cards issued almost a decade ago from 2012 or earlier, which contain outdated chip technology and are not compatible with the new fare gates. We have been working hard to inform customers about the trade-in options to get newer smart trip cards into their hands, and we'll continue that push in the coming months. A webpage, WMATA.com/card replacement, is available to guide customers through this process with materials available in 9 languages. Before I conclude, I do want to reiterate our excitement over the latest university to join the UPass program. Earlier this month, we announced an agreement with George Washington University that will bring UPass to the school's full-time students. With UPass, GW students will have access to unlimited rides to Metrorail and Metrobus, starting with a free trial in December and the official launch in the spring. The UPass program is a win-win-win for Metro students and the universities. This partnership is expected to generate additional revenue for Metro and help to build ridership with new transit users, while providing discounted travel for students, an important amenity for the university recruitment. That concludes my remarks, Madam Chair. I'd be glad to take any questions you may have.
Thank you for the report. I will just say that several months ago, I did go to your website and I did my smart trip card replacement. Extremely easy. I do encourage anyone who has not done that to go ahead and do that replacement, because you don't want to wait until the last minute and get to a station and you realize you have not replaced to the new smart trip card with the new chip in it. So thank you all for making that so easy. Are there any questions for the general manager? If so, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so thank you again, Mr. Whitterfield, for your report. We have one item on the board's consent agenda today. FY22 operating subsidy allocation. The staff seeks approval of a revised FY22 subsidy allocation. This action would revert the subsidy allocation to what was approved when the FY22 budget was adopted in April of 2021. The total subsidy amount remains unchanged at $1,109.7 million. I move approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Letourneau. I'll now ask for the roll call vote. Ms. Ellison.
Thank you. Mr. Gary?
Aye.
Vice Chair Babers,
Aye.
Vice Chair Slater,
Aye.
Ms. Klein,
Aye.
Mr. Letourneau,
Aye.
Dr. Lowe,
Aye.
Mr. Drummer,
Aye.
Ms. Martin Proctor.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you all. We'll now go to reports by the jurisdictions. We'll start with Virginia and Mr. Letourneau.
Thank you. The only thing I'll just update the board on that might be of interest is that the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission recently received a report from the city of Alexandria. We're represented today by our alternate director, actually, regarding their experience using electric buses. And obviously a lot smaller scale than what WMATA will be undertaking, but I think there's some really interesting information that can be gleaned there. Overall, customers responded to them, and they operated pretty well, but there were some operational reliability issues. There were some challenges involving the use of heaters and the battery drain, some challenges with hills, and then some challenges with the reliability of the actual charging apparatus themselves. And so there was a lot of discussion at the commission about further collaboration between jurisdictions as we enter into these pilot programs, and also the role that WMATA would have in sort of being a leader in kind of an overarching way with these smaller systems, because we have such scale. So I'm happy to provide for the board members that might be interested a copy of the presentation. And I think WMATA staff was present at the meeting and had the opportunity to see it as well. But I think as we enter this discussion, it's helpful to have a local jurisdiction that's already doing some of the work here and seeing what some of the issues are. And I'm sure as technology improves, hopefully manufacturers will be listening as well and can work on trying to solve those.
Yeah, Matt, could you send me a copy?
Certainly.
Thank you, Matt. And so next is any reports from the district. I don't have anything today. Tracy, do you have anything?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I do want to wish everyone a happy and safe holiday coming up. We'll next go to Maryland and Secretary Slater.
Great, thank you. Just the only thing I'll report is the WSTC is going to convene its semi-annual business meeting on Wednesday, December 15th. The meeting's going to be held virtually and scheduled to begin at 3 p.m. If you need more information, it's going to be posted on the Commission's website. You can go to WSTCMaryland, spelled out, .org, and click on the meetings tab if that's of interest to you. So that's the only thing I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Director Klein for the federal government.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge, as folks have mentioned already during this meeting, that the federal infrastructure bill has passed, including a reauthorization of federal transit programs. Federal Transit Administration has set up kind of a hub on their website for information related to that law. It's at transit.dot.gov/BID for bipartisan infrastructure deal. So folks can keep tuned to that website if they're interested in what's in that legislation for transit. Thank you. Let me see if Ms. Martin Proctor, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add on federal matters.
No, nothing to add at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. With no further business to come before the board, we stand adjourned and will move to executive session. Thank you. In accordance with the bylaws, I, Lucinda Babers, request that the Board of Directors convene an executive session to discuss the following matters pursuant to Article 2, Paragraph 9, subsections A, budgetary matters that may affect legal positions, WMATA contracts or sensitive relationships with local jurisdictions or the federal government, and F, safety and security matters when premature release would compromise public safety, and H, development of WMATA position or strategy on pending or proposed federal or state legislation. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, I think seconded by several people. I know one was Tracy, so.
One was Greg. That's
And Greg. Okay, Greg and Tracy. All in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.